Go.
Hi there, this is Louise from Handy Little Me, and today I'm going to answer some questions specifically for beginners who are just starting out knitting or crocheting, to give you some tips and to help you out with which yarns to use. So my assistant Demetra is going to ask me some questions that I get asked quite a lot by new crafters. Okay?
So what's the best yarn for beginners?
So the best yarn for beginners, I would say, is something that's super bulky because it's going to be really easy for you to knit with. So for example, this is a super bulky yarn. This is the wool from We Are Knitters. You can see how thick it is. And also a great one to use is Woolies Thick and Quick from Lion Brand. These are great yarns to use to practice with because they're thick. Everything that you're going to make is going to work up fast. It's going to be easy for you to see any drop stitches, any mistakes. And you can pull it out easily and try it again. So a thick yarn to start with. And you can make a hat, you can make a scarf, something that's going to be easy for you to practice the basic knitting stitches.
Okay, what's the best needles for beginners?
To match up with the super bulky yarn, I would say to get yourself a set of large needles. So these are 15s from We Are Knitters. They look huge. And it's going to be easy for you to kind of to get used to holding them, to control the yarn, and to really see what's happening, what you're doing. Also, it'll help you to control your tension because new knitters tend to knit really tightly and kind of pull the yarn really tightly and squeeze it off the end, And because of the big yarn and the big needles, it might help you to kind of loosen up a little bit and not get so tight. We've also got the pony needles. These are a 10 millimeter. Bamboo or wood is also great to use. Okay.
What's the best project for beginners?
A really great project for anyone who's new to knitting is this beanie hat. It's on my website, you might see it in the background, How to Knit a Hat. And it shows you step by step how to make this. It's knit flat, which means you knit back and forth, not in the round. And it gives you a very simple ribbed beanie hat with a fold down brim. You'll practice a basic cast on, knit stitches, purl stitches, and you don't have to cast this one off. You'll have a darning needle that you'll sew through the remaining stitches, and then you'll seam the hat. So there's a seaming line here. There's a tutorial on YouTube to help you to do that if you need it. That's a great project for beginners. And that is made with the petite wool from We Are Knitters, which is a bulky, chunky 12-ply yarn. Okay.
So, Louise, the next question is, what's your best tips for beginners?
Okay, so I wrote a few down to share with you. The first one that I would say is to not be afraid to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes when they are learning something new. Don't let that put you off. I still make mistakes. I would imagine every experienced knitter or crocheter still makes mistakes, even years later. It just happens. So keep going. Don't let that put you off. The next tip is, be patient, take it slowly, and don't feel overwhelmed. There's a lot of advice out there, a lot of patterns to look through. You might feel a bit overwhelmed by the techniques. What should I do first? Something like my knitting lessons might help you to see what order you need to kind of look at things. So like how to cast on, the knit stitch, the purl stitch, stockinette stitch, casting off, you know, like the basic things that you need to know. Next is, you know, have fun and keep that first project forever. You know, it'll remind you how you started. And then obviously as you get more advanced, you can look back and think, oh, wow, you know, I started off with this and look how far I've come now. Next tip, practice with an easy pattern to begin with. You know, I have a lot of people that message me and they'll say, oh, I'm working on this shawl pattern and I don't really understand any of it because it's an intermediate level pattern. So if you're a beginner who's never picked up the needles before, doesn't really know the stitches very well, you know, choose something that is for your level, a basic pattern, a scarf, a hat, you know, a dishcloth, something that's quite easy that'll let you practice those basic stitches before you get into sort of more advanced stitch patterns. The next tip is, you know, maybe just get a notebook, keep it with you, write some notes down, you know, on your pattern, you know, but maybe it's about the yarn that you've used, the needle size, any mistakes that you made, any abbreviations that you don't understand that you need to look up, any advice that you would give yourself for the next project. You know, keep a notebook with you. The next one is a really good tip, actually. This is something that you need to do as a beginner, and that's count your stitches every few rows. So say you cast on 20 stitches, after a couple of rows, count to make sure that you still have 20, because as a beginner, it's easy to kind of lose that end or the beginning or the end stitch and somehow create an extra stitch. So in beginner knitting, you often see the piece kind of having this shape because you're adding extra stitches at each end. So every few rows, make sure that you count to see that you have the same number of stitches that you started with. Another tip, use materials that you love. It's easy to kind of think, oh, I'm not sure about this, I'm going to buy some cheap needles or cheap yarn to practice with, which is fine. But if you really want to get into it, it might be worth, you know, getting a good pair of needles, nice wooden needles or some nice metal needles that you like the feel of, and some yarn that inspires you. Not that I'm saying acrylic yarn can't inspire you, like it can, but you know, have a look and find some yarn that speaks to you that you really want to work with, and it'll just make it more enjoyable for you. Another tip, learn how to hold the yarn so it's not too loose or too tight. You know, a lot of beginners have problems with the tension and they pull the yarn very tightly when they're moving. So, you know, have a practice at, you know, just loosening up a little bit, but not so loose that the stitches are going to fall off the needle. So that's a good thing to practice. Don't let patterns scare you. You know, a lot of patterns, you might read it through and think, oh, like, I don't know what that means. Like, it looks really complicated. There's all these different sections to it. You know, look at things, do things one step at a time. Okay, you look at it, cast on 20. Okay, I can cast on 20. Next bit, knit one stitch, purl one stitch. Okay, how do I knit this stitch? How do I purl this stitch? So just look at everything in a separate way, okay? One thing at a time. Don't look at it all and feel really overwhelmed. And also learn how to read the patterns, because that is going to be really helpful if you want to go further. So I do have a blog post on that, how to read knitting patterns, how to read crochet patterns, that helps you with like different abbreviations and things like that. So that is something that's going to be helpful for you. Okay, another tip. Be patient with yourself. You know, give yourself some time to really get into it, to learn the different techniques that you need to know. You know, don't rush it. Just take your time. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be relaxing. You know, not like me where I have deadlines now that I have to make everything in time for photo shoots and things like that. You know, just take your time and enjoy it. Last tip, there's no knitting police that will tell you like what yarn to use, what needles to use, how you should do this, how you should do that. You know, it's up to you. You choose your needles, you choose your yarn. Whatever you want to work with is, you know, fine. There's nobody out there that's going to be like, oh, you know, why did you choose this yarn? It's totally up to you. And that's the fun process of it. You know, you're putting your creative stamp on the thing that you're making. So, you know, go with whatever you want. And that's it really. So
Louise, where do you buy your yarn?
I buy my yarn mostly online, on the Lovecrafts website, and the We Are Knitters website. So Lovecrafts have got a US site and a UK site, but the UK site does ship to the EU, so you can get yarn if you're in the EU as well. It takes a bit longer, maybe it's 10 days, but it is tracked, so you will get it. And We Are Knitters have a US, a UK, and an EU site, so you can buy it from there. If you live in an area that has local yarn stores, it's obviously worth going down, having a browse, having a feel of the yarns, you know, seeing which ones speak to you. And there's a lot of independent makers as well who have yarn stores where they dye their own yarns, and that's beautiful to go into a place like that and, you know, have a look and support an independent person that's making and dyeing their own yarn. But if, like me, you don't have any sort of local yarn stores, then ordering online might be the only option. Okay? Is that the end of the questions?
No.
Okay. So thank you so much for watching. And if you have any other questions that you would like to ask me, please write them in the comments and I'll get back to you. So happy knitting and happy crocheting. And till next time. Okay, goodbye.